Everything works in a courtroom.
Yeah. Oh, I was never in a courtroom, kind of scary. Anyway, welcome. I hope everybody feels that we're sort of like on the homeward stretch. We got a couple important things to do today. Basically, it's the timetable. We send it out to you, but it's not absolutely so we really need to hear what you think about it. We think we have to keep pretty close to that in order to get our objectives done, but we'll have that big discussion with Joe a little later. A reminder as we're talking, because we do say, all our meetings are being filmed and everything. And a lot of times we like to jump ahead with anticipation because some committees have already made recommendations. But just to remember, we don't talk about recommendations as if we've made them, because this commission has not made any recommendations. We've had reports on the committees, we've had the options they're talking about, we've talked about possible recommendations, but let's not talk about it. I think in our enthusiasm, sometime when we talk to people, we get a little ahead of ourselves. So that's just a gentle reminder. We have a great surprise today at 8:30. Lisa's assistant, Rob's assistant Lisa, was able to get Jerry Abramson. Now, Jerry Abramson now works in the White House as their liaison with local governments, but he was the architect of the Louisville reorganization. He's full of a lot of information. You're getting a little stuff on him right now. He's a very enthusiastic kind of guy. He lived it. He knows the pitfalls. He's very open to questions and everything. And unfortunately, our big spider thing didn't work. So we'll have to probably repeat questions for him on it. But at 8:30, he will be here. And some of us have already heard him, and he really just gets your juices flowing for this kind of a project on it. Okay, so without further ado, we're turning it over to the man of the hour. Oh, Steve? Hi, Steve.
Yeah.
Okay, Steve. We just started up. And the surprise is at 8:30 we're going to have Jerry Abramson, who was the architect was then mayor, and he's been the governor, and he's been everything in Louisville and in Kentucky. And he's going to be on the phone to give us, his perspective on what they did wrong and we could do right and things like that. So we're now on number 2 on the end, and we're talking about where we are on our report, and that's Joseph.
Thanks, Catherine. Good morning, everybody. I know Murph is going to speak in a bit to the draft timeline that was sent around yesterday, but what I wanted to do was provide a little context. A key part of that timeline here, of course, is this options and tentative recommendations report. And I just wanted to share with you where we are, CGR, in that process, trying to capture and memorialize all the conversations that took place at the various committee meetings over the last 6 plus months, I guess, and give you a sense of what that report's going to look like. You'll see a draft of that over the next month or so. So first of all, just to kind of set the framework here, the report really has 2 main objectives. The first is, as I suggested, to present to the community all the contextual issues and that range of conceptual options that each of the committees have been talking about over the last 6 or so months, and to do it on a service-by-service category. We've had pretty broad-ranging conversations, frankly, in every committee to date, and our challenge right now is trying to synthesize those, boil those down to some key points. And then secondly, to present each of the tentative recommendations at the committee level. Now, as Catherine said, and I want to reinforce, of course, the full commission has not made any formal recommendations yet, has not fully endorsed a formal sense, any kind of recommended plan here. So we're at the committee tentative recommendation stage. And so we'll present those to the extent that committees have arrived at those tentative recommendations. We'll present those in the report along with the rationale for each of those tentative recommendations. We want to be able to use this report as a jumping off point for the next stage in public engagement, community engagement. And that really is a community dialogue about the issues, the contextual issues that the committees have covered over the last 6 or so months, and again, these tentative recommendations and the rationale. We don't see this, the way we build this options and tentative recommendations report, we don't see this as a kind of community inform and consent document. this really is a framework for what will be a couple of months at least of robust public engagement. We'll hear more about that public engagement process in just a couple of minutes. But this is really where the Public Engagement Committee's efforts are going to start to ramp up. So the format of the report, just in summary fashion, this will really build on all of the data and information that was contained within the baseline report. We will not repeat that here. We'll provide some segues from the baseline report to this new report where it makes sense. But right up front in the options report, we always refer readers back to the baseline report. There'll be a number of references in there. So all the information on what we spend and what services individual local governments provide, to the extent that there are differences in the types of services and the levels of services, we'll refer readers back to the baseline report. This report will basically have one chapter for each of the committees. So each of our kind of functional or service area committees. So one each for public safety. Of course, public safety will include breakout for fire and EMS, police, corrections, and so on. Infrastructure and the various breakouts there, municipal operations, governance, and economic development. And again, within each of those sections, you think about the slide presentation from our last commission discussion, summarizing the key contextual issues to the extent that committees identify things that are working, things that are not working, things that inhibit greater levels of efficiency maybe, to the extent that there are external stakeholders or policies, mandates, whatever you want to call them, state level, federal level, that make it difficult to improve our efficiency and operations at the municipal level here. Those will be presented in the options report as well. We're also going to present, as the title suggests, the range of options, the range of conceptual options as they were outlined in the white papers for each of the committees. And to the extent that committee conversations went into greater detail, added some color, some additional flavor around the range of options in the white papers, we'll present that in the report as well. The goal here in presenting those options is really to contextualize for readers what we currently do here in Onondaga County vis-a-vis these other models. So I always want to say at the outset, we say this at the very beginning of the options report, the status quo, what we do today, appears on that continuum of options, right? We don't want to start from the standpoint that what we're doing today is wrong. What we're doing today is not working in some kind of universal sense. So we want to make sure that we appropriately contextualize what we're doing today and how that fits in along that range of options. And then, as I said, to the extent that committees are at a point where, and I think for the, we've been leaning toward, with our last commission conversation, of course, we talked about some tentative committee leanings, tentative recommendations. We'll present those in the body of the report, along with the rationale for how the committees have gotten there. And again, what we want to do is not just provide that as a, as a takeaway for the community to absorb. We want the community to understand the process, understand, have the benefit of the committee conversations over the last half year, and use that as a jumping off point to be able to engage in some really robust public engagement through December, January, February. The community, residents, stakeholders are going to need that information in order to engage in a robust conversation. So our intent in the options and tentative recommendations report is to give them the ammunition to be able to engage in that discussion in an informed and educated way. So that at a very high level is kind of the framework, the plan for the options report. And we have, last thing I'll say is, we are in the process of drafting the options report right now, and the jumping off point really is the outline that we talked about at the last commission meeting. So I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have on that. And as I said before, we're going to talk about the timeline momentarily, and it'll help you better understand where the options report will fit in over the next couple of months.
Are there any questions for Joe right now? Okay, then we'll go to a little updates. As you remember, the last time we had a couple of our committees that still had some more meetings scheduled with different people. So we're going to ask for updates, but I just wanted to update you. The co-chairs met with both the mayor and the county executive since our last meeting, a couple of times, I guess. mayor a couple times. And what we were trying to do was make sure that they understood and were on board where we were going, and just, keep the information flowing between us. They're still both very, very supportive. The last meeting was about the URI that Rob will talk about when he gets here on it, and our inclusion in the URI. So we just wanted to make sure everybody was on board, and as you know, there was some language. We sent out the language to you. There's some language changes, and that was the result of our meeting. Okay, of the mayor and the county executive. They're both still very committed to our process, and we're going to brainstorm with them a little more, because they're in this process every day. They think about it every day, so we want to pick their brains about some of it. So that's still in the horizon. Because of the phone, I think if we turn it for Darlene,
Yeah.
you probably can do it fine, but Bill, you might have to come on up here when you go to give yours, okay? So first of all, Darlene, what's going on in our public safety?
Okay. Just a refresher, our committee consists of Sheriff Gene Conway, First Deputy Police Chief retired Dave Barrett from the Syracuse Police Department, Mark Olson, Kathy Murphy, and Paul Bishop. Okay, in the area of police, again, a little background. The county is served right now by 15 police agencies: the Sheriff's Department, the Syracuse Police Department, 5 town and 7 village police departments, and the state police. There are 2 corrections departments in Onondaga County: the Justice Center, which is operated by the Sheriff's Department, and the Jamesville Penitentiary, operated by Onondaga County government. In 2013, the total budget for corrections and probation was $57.5 million. And the total budget for police, excluding state police, was $88 million. The committee has completed all of its interviews with experts in police and corrections. Police interviews were held with Sheriff Gene Conway, Syracuse Police Chief Frank Fowler, and First Deputy Police Chief Dave Barrett, State Police Troop D Commander Major Frank Coots, Town of Manlius Police Chief Fran Marlowe, Village Police Chief Michael Lefanchek, and Tom Cannellan, formerly of the Syracuse Police Department and the Gang Violence Task Force. Each of these experts provided us with an overview of their department, their organization structure, the services provided, collaborations with other agencies, challenges faced, and opportunities for improvement, including consolidation. Now, of course, the major challenge for the Syracuse Police Department, sheriffs, and state police is violence is on the rise. Gangs, guns, drugs, and domestic disputes all rising. And as the calls are increasing, the manpower has been decreasing. Both the Syracuse PD and the Sheriff's Department are down 10% in terms of number of police officers. These agencies have extensive collaboration through task forces and specialty teams for drugs, guns, and crime investigations, and they are really a best practice in that regard. Paul Bishop looked at other counties and states and so forth, looked at their police agencies, and told us that they are best practice in terms of the degree of collaboration that they have already. They freely share information among all police departments throughout the county. Now, all of these experts acknowledge that consolidation into a metropolitan force would allow for a larger pool of resources, especially personnel, to be deployed more effectively than they are right now in their silo organizations. Also, eliminating managerial positions through consolidation would free up money to put more officers on the street and acquire technologies such as more street cameras and information systems to aid in solving cases. Also, specialized units could be consolidated and strengthened. We have not estimated the cost of consolidation, and then we need to consider also the challenges that include different pay scales and benefits for similar positions across agencies. Multiple unions are involved, politics of course, and differences in work practices. Town and village police, I've been so far talking mostly about sheriffs and state police and city police. The town and village police believe rather strongly that their service is important and desired by their constituents. And some have conducted surveys that actually say that. They definitely say that. People feel safer because of their local law enforcement presence. These police agencies are supported by tax dollars and by 40% of the revenues collected from traffic fines. And I want to note here that New York State takes the other 60% of the revenues collected by towns and villages for traffic violations. 60% goes to the state. Okay, now we'll talk about corrections. Yeah, I know.
Sarah's sitting there.
Is there, no, there's a little clearing your throat.
Right. Corrections. Interviews were conducted with Sheriff Conway, who's responsible for the Justice Center, and Corrections Commissioner Tim Cowan, responsible for the Jamesville Penitentiary. Both institutions are served by the same county support organizations: Human Resources, Training, IT, Purchasing, etc. There are two facilities, however: the Justice Center, which is downtown, and the Penitentiary in Jamesville. There are two unions, two different pay scales, which currently preclude the interchange of personnel between the Justice Center and the Penitentiary, even though the job of corrections officer is the same for both. And actually, prisoners of the Justice Center are often temporarily housed at Jamesville due to an inadequate number of cells at the Justice Center. While the number of corrections officer positions is adequate, not enough people are working due to disabilities, sickness, and military call-ups. The sheriff and the corrections commissioner agree that one consolidated department would be better if there are enough savings to justify it and the other obstacles to achieving it can be overcome. Our next step is we're at a point where we can define and assess the organization options for police and corrections and develop recommendations to be staged again, those that can be implemented immediately and those longer term. Any corrections or additions from the committee? And then questions?
No, I think it was just enlightening.
Got down to 60%.
I know, me too. What? You know, what's going on there?
So I think it was enlightening on the aspect of the corrections, and I'm sitting next to two people who kind of know this day in and day out. I never knew that. I thought it was just one, and so that was very enlightening, and it didn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But the other thing with the police, listening to these police chiefs and listening, it's, there's a lot of things that can happen, but it's got to be society along with the police and along with a lot of things happening. They're not the silver, excuse this expression, silver bullet. They're not going to fix it. They're not going to be the ones to correct a lot of the ills of society, but they're dealing with it. And from corrections dealing with, you would think their biggest problem is not, I think it was 16 to 18-year-olds. It's their
16, yeah.
biggest drain of their resources because of the time and what it takes to deal with it. And you would have thought it would have been something else. So it was very, very interesting. And it's going to be, I think they have a lot of good recommendations, but I'm on the opposite side of Paul Bishop and some of the other ones on the committee. I think they need more resources to take care of some of the issues. And when you see that they're down 10% since 2008, I think it was, Darren, the city's down 147 officers.
Yes.
And what he's done is he's had to leave some of the other things that they were doing with the gang task force and other things to deal with the other issues.
Right.
So it's, you've lost a resource here to take care of a problem here. Well, now that problem crops up, and he's got to take resources from here to deal with that. You got to have manpower to deal with that problem.
Questions?
It's a question, but I just think as we proceed in this area, especially as a region, there is a lot of research behind the fact that we're putting more money into prisons than we are into education in our country. And I think we have to be very mindful of the fact that being proactive, which the police I think would want us to be, is how are we providing for an educated citizenry that's making right citizenship decisions and choices, and then providing the appropriate levels of security and safety in each of our communities. I think the two are in interdependency of the making of choices, and I think we should be analyzing it as to where can we find the pockets of where 16 to 18-year-olds are making right choices. Because when kids are born, it's not about the street that they necessarily live on. It's about what gives you the decision-making processes as you come into that age range to be making choices that are better choices instead of the negative choices. And because it's a very reactionary kind of model. If we,
And each and every one of these people said that very thing.
they live it.
Yeah.
They live it.
They cannot solve that problem,
Right.
but, they're the ones who are dealing with it now. And Chief Fowler in particular had some interesting perspectives on that and observations. So thank you.
Charlie, this is Jim.
Yes,
Is there any way, or first question I guess is, do all counties have their own correctional facility? Not counting the Justice Center, the Janesville sort of arrangement. Do most counties have that? And if the ones that don't, how do they ship those folks and where do they go? And is there a way for us to conceivably ship that cost to the state?
if my memory serves me well, I think that all counties have jails in New York. Does anybody remember anything different?
Joe, the tier is, what is it, under 2 years housed in your county for the conviction, and over 2 years, you're housed in a state-run
I think that's right,
facility.
yeah.
And it has,
Right.
it's tied, Jim, if I'm remembering correctly, to crime, felony, level,
Level of offense,
misdemeanor,
right.
time
Right.
served, etc. So your first stop is typically never a state-run facility.
Right,
We're one of only the few that have two separate
okay.
facilities.
We're one of, that was Ann saying, we're one of few counties that have still retained the Justice Center and the County Center as two separate facilities that have not combined the housing into one operation.
And also another distinction is that the Justice Center is primarily temporary
Overnight
housing
holding,
of
right.
inmates.
Right.
As they go through the arraignment process, as they're going
Waiting
through the
for
court
trial.
process,
Right.
waiting for trial and grand
Right.
jury, whereas Janesville is more of the permanent long-term housing, but you're correct, it's usually up to 2 years if there's 2 consecutive one-year sentences.
Can I, Darlene,
Yes.
does your committee talk about raise the age? Because I know a lot of discussion about the
Yes,
16 and
we did.
17-year-olds that for statewide, it is going to happen. And so that attention on 16 and 17-year-olds, they will all move to family court rather than criminal court. So those individuals, we have to do the planning around, they'll be more likely housed in Hillbrook than they will
Right, yes, they
in.
did bring that up. Right.
So I just wanted to mention that Professor Paul Jarowski is here from Rutgers, and he did the piece on the architecture of poverty. And he's the one who started the whole conversation about why we're number 1 in the country for poverty of African American and Latino families or peoples, right? And so it's about a series of policies that have just layered on top of each other over decades that we need to unbundle to begin to eliminate the poverty. We begin to eliminate the poverty, we begin to lessen the crime, right? So it's this holistic approach to thinking about how we talk about this situation. And I just wanted to put that in everybody's mind for a moment. And if you want, I'll forward you his report so that you can all have a copy of it. He was here yesterday, he spoke to the community twice. Joni was at both sessions. I was with her at St. Lucy's last night. It was really interesting to hear the community beg, right, for opportunities of self-reliance. They know that their opportunities have lessened over the decades, and they were begging for the opportunities to self-reliance. If I could just give you a highlight of what I heard for 2 hours last night at St. Lucy's.
I think a very important factor is the absolute revitalization plan. The opportunity agenda is taken for the first year a very, very strong place in the economic development program. And there has in that been allocated, I think, $50 million to advance the opportunity agenda. So I think everybody is recognizing it. And I think the Rutgers report has cataloged some of that actually. Yeah.
And the mayor mentioned that on Capitol for a day. That was her, she got to speak, and she spoke about that one topic, which was poverty in the city.
Yeah.
So that was her big, and I know Ann was there. That was her big speak for that day. So I think it is on the forefront right now of what's important.
And Louisville is on the top 10 list, by the way, of cities with high poverty for Black and especially African Americans. I have the list if anybody wants to see it.
And I think
We're 1 and they're 10, so we have to be careful.
And people are getting to is that in our work, even if it takes us a little bit longer, unless we ultimately address the root causes,
Right.
we're rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. You know, I mean, so, and I think we just have to be mindful of that, not to buy into strategies that might look to be really taking care of something that ultimately will, over time, also erode because the root causes were never addressed.
Right, no question about it.
Darlene, how much of what the police are doing is driven by kind of national standards or national mandates at this point? I mean, two things come to mind. Use of body cameras.
They don't have them. They weren't funded for body cameras in Syracuse.
There's only one, town mailings and one other police department has them.
Yeah, Syracuse Police Department does not have them.
And all the ones that had them are absolutely in favor of it.
Campus safety.
You know, that was not a big issue, as I heard from them, no. Mandates were not an issue.
Nope.
But although, and Anjan talked to this also, I think in the correctional facilities, there have been a number of state mandates that have put a tremendous financial pressure on the entities and on the county, especially as it relates to monitoring of inmates who are in a sensitive position on suicide watch. Something similar to that. There had been for many, many years at least represented to us that there's a requirement for one-on-one monitoring. Now, since Gene Conway came in, I think his administration and probably with the county executive's office were able to change that to a degree with the state, whereas the state, I think, is now allowing 1-on-3 or 1-on-4. So that has really eliminated tremendous financial pressure as it relates to overtime and manpower. But that's one that comes to mind.
Folks on the phone, could you hear Patrick?
It's a little difficult to hear.
Okay. Well, because we don't have the spider phone, we're just dealing with a regular phone, so if you don't, just speak up.
Everybody that's been sort of addressing the group is very clear, but people.
Well, because Pat's the farthest away too, that's what it is.
It's my fault, right? 'Cause it's my phone.
We're gonna move Pat up to the big table.
Okay,
Okay,
is that it?
that's it.
That's it? Well, that's been a lot since the last time though,
Yeah.
because we hadn't even been talking about police, so that's very good. Bill, do you want to come up here and Bill Byrne will give us what's
So
going on?
I'd like to sit very close to you two people.
Yeah, but be careful, your knees don't take your kneecaps off.
I'm serious. These two have been fabulous in terms of helping our community. Okay, so in addition to chairing this overall operation. I'm here to report on the infrastructure committee and what we've been doing and where we are. We did meet on September 9th to review the tentative recommendations that came out of our August meeting. And there were just some minor things and a few little things I need to get to Joe. We didn't think we emphasized enough on human resources potentials in terms of working at a higher level across the county. I'm not going to go through the details of our tentative recommendations, but just as kind of a reminder to catch up and maybe people have something to say on some of these issues. But the things we dealt with were street and highway maintenance, water, wastewater, solid waste collection, mass transit, broadband, and parks. There's very clearly a common theme. And this is no big surprise to any of us here, okay? We have too many government entities doing the same task, and that we are missing very significant opportunities to take advantage of economies of scale. And it's about that simple, and the issue is, what do we do and how do we get to where we need to be? Our most detailed tentative recommendations are in the area of street and highway maintenance, where we have 36 separate service providers in the county, each with their own workforce, fleet, planning, and administration. The data clearly shows the correlation between scale and unit cost. And our key tentative recommendation is to create a core highway services area that integrates the city in more densely developed suburban communities. And it's a system structured on density instead of geography. And I think that the concept of working on a density basis on a lot of infrastructure issues is a very important one that we need to develop further in relation to some of the other areas that we worked in, not just in public works.
Sharon.
We
Good
do.
morning, folks.
Good morning.
This is Jerry Abrams, and I got out of senior staff 7:30 meeting a little early, so I didn't know whether I should
Great.
wait till 8:30.
No.
Sorry,
You just
Bill.
saved us from sewers.
I was really getting ready to go ahead. I reserved my time.
Okay, we're glad you joined us, Cap. I think we're gonna have to do it because Rob is talking.
Well, I think,
Or Joe.
I think everybody actually knows of the infamous Jerry Averson. And some of us on this commission have had the benefit of hearing him, and his enthusiasm and his really down to earth, here's things that didn't work, here's things I wish I had done, really were enough to get my juices flowing completely and getting excited about this project. So I don't know how you want to do it, but Jerry, whatever your thoughts are, what you could convey to us, tell us a little bit how it, it took 100 years to do and all those kinds of things, but we're hoping to do it in a shorter period of time than it took Louisville, but I think some of the lessons learned would be great, and just how about what you did and what was the end result too. So however you want to take it, it's
Well, let me
great.
frame it up first in terms of the community. It's a county of about 750,000, with a city of Louisville in the center of about 275 or 80,000. It has 83 little cities, little suburban cities. Some, as the one I grew up in, all of 4 blocks. The largest, and most of them are that size. The largest one has about 20,000, and balloons to the 40,000 because it's got an industrial park during the day. It's a county that has about, therefore, a third city of Louisville, old city of Louisville residents, a third suburban city residents, and a third unincorporated county residents. We realized back in the late, well, many of us realized back in the late 60s that was no way to run a railroad. And cities like Indianapolis and cities like Nashville and cities like Jacksonville put it on the ballot in the late 60s, as did Louisville. Those cities passed consolidation. Our city did not. And we percolated along for quite a while, watching the cities that did, in fact, consolidate grow a lot faster than we were growing, seemed to be more dynamic than we were. So in the early 80s, we tried it again. And it failed by about, if I remember correctly, about 1,400 votes, a vote of the entire county to consolidate.
Shoot yourself.
I beg pardon?
Shoot yourself.
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
okay.
Well, we figured it was so close, we'll come back the next year and we'll put it on the ballot again, and we did, and we lost by 2,500 votes. So we're going in the right direction. So the business community, which was a moving force in so many ways, we all decided, the county executive and myself, that we would, this is now 1985, going into the January, I'm just taking office, January 186 as mayor of the old city of Louisville. The new county executive and myself, the new mayor, sat down, we negotiated about 26 meetings that ultimately created what we called a compact. We called it a compact because we had to have a name, and there was a thesaurus on the desk at our last meeting, and we looked up agreement. We called it a compact. And that compact, the part that would be most, I think, interesting to you all, is that we had in the old city of Louisville an occupation tax, a business tax, 1.2% off the gross, that went into the city coffers. And the same exact amount went into the county coffers. If you had your business outside the city but in the county. And we, as you can imagine, therefore, the county executive and I would meet a business prospect at the airport, and I would say, welcome to Louisville, please locate inside the 60 square miles we call home. And the county exec would say, welcome to Jefferson County, please locate outside the 60 square miles of Louisville. And generally the business leader would get back on the plane and say, when you get your community squared away, let us know, we'll be back. And so what we did with this compact compact is we set up a formula of how to share the occupation tax. So every new dollar that came in from every new company would be shared on a formula basis. A little bit would be taken off the top to go to the governmental entity that might have to do a little infrastructure work to assist in locating a new corporate headquarters or a new business in a factory. And then based on the last 10 years that we had run an analysis of where the occupation tax had gone into either the city or the county in the past. That was the formula that we set into place for 10 years. And that was our breathing room after back-to-back losses for a merger. We decided we would have a 10 years, let's take stock, let's stop the annexation, which is what I had started aggressively once it failed, in an attempt to eat up as much of the county as I could. Let's just all relax. And that's what we did. And we went about 10 years or so, and actually we renewed it for another 10 years when a new initiative was thought about in terms of moving forward for consolidation. And this time, our proposal was drafted, as I told the group earlier, by all the elected officials in the county. So we put together, we decided that this is going to pass, it had to be something that the state legislature would give us the right to do. So we used all our state legislators and all our state senators, because we didn't have the right any longer. The people who had been against merger got the statute changed, so we had to get the state statute changed to give us the right to vote on it again. So we got all the state legislators, all the state senators, we got all the little city mayors, we got myself, the county executive, we got the sheriff, and anybody who was elected anywhere that wanted to come to these meetings to ultimately develop a game plan. And out of that, what basically came forward was an approach that said, we will consolidate the city of Louisville and the county of Jefferson into one chief executive and a metro council. And in the old county government, there were only 3 county commissioners. Each one represented about 250,000 people. In the old city of Louisville, there were 12 council members. We called them aldermen, and they each represented about 25,000. And we thought that it would make sense to have a council, a metro council, that would be reflective of smaller constituents, so there'd be more direct input from the citizens to their elected officials. So we created 26 slots. Each of those metro council people would represent about 26,000 people. And the district would be laid out by, this is sort of an interesting wrinkle, not by any political process, but by the geography department at the University of Louisville. We selected the chairman of the department and his graduate students along with them at hearings all over town once it passed to ultimately put a map on the wall and then have hearings again within the parameters of try to keep neighborhoods together, try to keep suburban cities as much as you could together, etc. So our proposal was to merge the city government and the county government into one chief executive, strong mayor form of government, and one council. And that's it. That's all it said. We let all the little cities continue to be little cities because we finally decided that it didn't matter on all the big issues. They simply were neighborhood groups. If they wanted to tax their people more for another police officer on the weekends or for a police officer on the weekends, or if they wanted to tax their people more for a flowered entryway into their little city, so be it. But for the first time, the people in their little cities were going to have a metro council person who will be sitting at the metro council table making the decisions to move community-wide issues. So ultimately, we put it on the ballot. We have, in the old city, it was about a third African American. In the new city, it was about 20% African American. We said we would design, we charged the geography department to design districts that would be reflective of the new face of Louisville. And so we wanted to ensure a minimum of 20% of the new Metro Council would be minority, which happened, and then some. Because there were several districts that could go either way, and a couple of them did. And we put it on the ballot this time, as I said, without saying we were going to consolidate EMS, we were going to consolidate the finance department, we were going to consolidate the city in the county police department, because what we found out back in the 80s was that I'd knock on the door and I'd say vote for merger, and they'd say, well, I'm really for it, but my cousin's an EMS employee, and he doesn't think he'll come out successfully in the consolidation of EMS. So by us saying that we would simply consolidate the elected positions and let the electeds decide what should and should not merge, I was able to respond to the guy, oh, there's no problem, we're not merging EMS. That'll happen down the road, and you'll have a neighbor on the Metro Council that you'll be able to tell them about your cousin's issue. The reality was, on day one, I introduced an ordinance to merge everything, which passed unanimously. But we didn't tell them.
A lot of transparency there.
Speaking into a microphone.
So we put it on the ballot, and we ran a political campaign with a Democrat and Republican Paul, who organized the campaign. We spent a lot of money on polling, spent it just as you would in a campaign, a lot of direct mail, and ultimately we won the race, we won the election 54 to 46. We put it on the ballot during the Bush 2000 election, because we thought the more people would show up, the better off we would be in merger. So we put it on presidential election year, and we won. One of the mistakes we made is we didn't create the government until January 2003, so it was an awful long time between when people voted for it and when it finally became effective. But having said that, all the polling since then has shown people have been either they don't see any difference or they've been positive. In the election itself, we got about 29% of the African American vote, because all the elected officials, African-American elected officials, were opposed to merger. But the weekly African-American newspaper, the Urban League, and we put together a lot of young professional African-American lawyers, and doctors, and insurance guys and gals, and accountants, etc., who were talking about better to have a potential smaller slice of a larger pie than to have a larger slice of a shrinking pie. And we carried about, as I said, about 29%. And we won 54-46. We won both inside the city limits and outside the city limits, although that was not a requirement. Normally, as I told your group, when we lost in the past, it always passed inside the city. It never passed outside the city. So we had a county executive at that time who was very active in a blue-collar area where she was from, and she really believed after one term as county executive that we needed to consolidate. She happened to be a Republican. The mayor happened to be, at that time, I had gone out of office after 3 terms, but was co-chair of the merger, and the mayor was for it, sort of. She was able to get the area of town where we normally lost 4-1 in the blue-collar area to only, we lost it 2-1, which was enough to make the difference. Newspaper was 1,000% for us. Obviously on the news, not obviously anymore in this day and age, but back then, obviously on the news side, it was very objective and took the pros and the cons and all that. But on the editorial page, every day there was a myth and fact box that, the antis would say taxes are going up, and here's really what's going to happen. The antis would say zoning problems are going to occur, here's really what's going to happen. The editorial cartoons were just fabulous in our favor, and I remember the one that I shared with your group earlier, where we had a bicycle that had handlebars facing right and handlebars facing left. Left said county, the right said city, and obviously we weren't going anywhere until we all pulled in the same direction. So that's basically it. The business community raised about $1 million to do this campaign. And the other side was significantly underfunded. And that's about it. And we won.
It's great. Question. Yes.
So, this was accomplished in 2003. You implemented this merger in 2003. What have been the benefits of the merger?
Well, a couple of things happened. We took the city and county police department, put them together. It's about 1,200 to 1,400 cops, and we were able to redeploy the districts and redeploy the guys and gals on the street to show that we had more police coverage. EMS was the exact same way. I mean, we had county EMS, we had city EMS, and we had these, peculiar boundaries. Like there was a shopping center that in the middle of the parking lot. One side was the city and one side was the county, and the call would come in. And, there's a problem, there's an accident, there's something. And the dispatcher would say, "Well, you're on the west side of the parking lot." And, they would say, "We don't know. We're just bleeding." So, ultimately, EMS was able to, once you take down those arbitrary boundaries, was able to, in a much more comprehensive way, provide coverage. It was those kinds of nitty-gritty things that worked out well. It also gave us an opportunity to speak with one voice. We became a city of about 740,000 people, 16 parts in the country. It gave us an opportunity to be on that top 20 list. It gave us an opportunity to go to the state legislature and talk about things that we thought were important for a state of about 4.4 million. We were 750,000 of them. I certainly people out in the suburbs and in the county and the unincorporated area got for the first time to be heard. We started spending money on parks out in that area, things that the county just never had any money to do, on bikeways and things that we were always doing in the city. And so I think all in all, it worked out well for folks.
Jerry, what about the overall cost of government once you guys came together?
We were going right into the recession, and it's interesting. I'm not going to tell you that there weren't startup expenses, and there were. We had to fight over. The county police had a stripe in pants. The city police had no stripe on their pants. So what was the new stripe going to be? What were the new slacks going to be like? And I had to design a new badge, and I had to design a new patch, and I had to repaint all the cars. Thought the best way to let folks know it was a new day for them as quickly as we could repaint our city and county police cars in one that I got the cops to agree on color and get those out. So all of that costs. We had to create a consolidated financial management system. We had to create a consolidated PeopleSoft for HR. Having said that, just by merging the city, the mayor's office and the county executive's office, we saved $700,000 that year. So there were costs, but there also were savings. I was like Noah on my first day. I had two of everything, and I didn't need two finance directors, two police chiefs, two. So there were savings, but having said that, I had to repaint ultimately all the EMS vehicles, and all those things cost. But we were able to ultimately, within the first 4 years, decrease our employment in local government by about 22%. So we had fewer people working and delivering what we thought were as good, if not better, services.
Jerry, what?
Was there any impact on the relationship with the state or with federal in terms of formula from TBG funds or Section 8 housing or anything like that? Well, we just consolidated it all. We didn't lose any. And in some cases with new grants, we might have been more successful speaking with such a large voice. But, whatever the CDBG was going out to the county and the city, we simply consolidated. And we thought we were more efficient by doing it that way.
What was
What
it?
did the public feel?
Steve, yeah.
I don't know if the public in general felt much. You mean in terms of the campaign or in terms of the first year? Well, just maybe, I suppose, first year, first 18 months. Yeah. You commented that you were able to reduce employment and you felt the same level of service, maybe even better, was being delivered. Yeah. I think the folks out in the suburbs saw the biggest change. I think the folks in the city were used to having an elected person for every 25,000. I think they were used to being able to know who he or she was. For the first time, folks out in the county had an opportunity to vote for a person in their neighborhood. We also, as you can imagine, especially me coming out of the old city, I bent over backwards to spend lots of money on visible things in the county to show that we were one. And we made it clear it wasn't a takeover. And that's why the name of our government is the Louisville Jefferson County Metro Government. Indianapolis is the Indianapolis-Marion County Unigov. We were trying to figure out what to call ourselves, and I was bringing my family back from a Florida vacation, that spring break, or Christmas break, I guess. Got caught in Nashville traffic, which you always do if you drive through Nashville. And there was a cop car right next to me, and it said Nashville Davidson Metro. I said, I like that. So we were going to call it Greater Louisville. And then all of a sudden we realized that we would be listed under G. So I came back and I called the state legislator guy who was in charge of moving the statute, statute forward to allow us to vote. I said, we got to change the name. He said, what do you want to change it to? I said, we got to change it to Louisville Jefferson County Metro. He said, okay. That's what we did.
Okay, I was interested, what would you say was the economic development kind of impact when you, attracting new businesses to your area?
Well, that was one of the arguments we used. We never sold the plan on we're going to save you money, lower your taxes. We just never said that. We said that we would speak with one voice, be a larger community, and you'll have an opportunity for your kids and grandkids to be home every weekend should you want to visit them rather than just wait for Christmas and Easter. And economic development, it all occurred when, out of your area, a little further, I guess, south from Syracuse, when, what was it, PepsiCo was going to spun off what is now Yum Brands, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Taco Bell, and Pizza Hut, and PepsiCo. And they created a new entity called, at that time, Tricon, now Yum Brands. And the question was, where were they going to locate this world's largest restaurant chain? And it was either going to be in Louisville, where KFC was, or Dallas, where Pizza Hut was, or Irvine, California, where Taco Bell was. And we were successful in getting them to locate. And as soon as they got there, they had a piece of land next to KFC where they're going to set up their world headquarters. And I get a call from the CEO of the new corporate entity, and he says, Mayor, I thought you said we were in Louisville. I said, of course you're in Louisville. We're so excited to have you with us, that. And he said, well, our guys tell me that half this land is in something called the county, and half this land is in something called the city, and you have different permits and different inspections. And what the hell kind of place you running around here? Well, obviously, we quickly resolved any and all issues that he had, but we used that as an example of saying we got to start permitting as one. We got to start developing under rules and regs and zoning as one, and it would create an opportunity as I travel around the country, talking about the new Louisville, to talk about this major community of 50,000 people. And so can I point to someone that said, I selected Louisville because it merged? No, I really can't. But we had a great story to tell. We were more efficient than we had been in the past. We were more streamlined. We had less employees delivering good services. And we were one community pulling in the same direction. That was always a pretty good sales pitch.
Pretty good.
Jerry, ultimately, are residents paying less for taxes?
No, everybody's paying the same. That's the interesting, that's the peculiarity. And you will find the same in Indianapolis and Nashville. The old city of Louisville is called, under our tax system, the urban taxing district. Those of us who live in the old city, we pay the most tax. And we pay the most tax, but we get the most services. We have firefighting in our neighborhoods, firehouses. We have garbage pickup and recycling pickup and yard waste pickup, all of which, and our streetlights are all picked up, all part and parcel of the extra tax we pay. The next group would be the 1/3 of the community that is in the suburban area. They pay the countywide tax, as do I inside the city, or the old city. But they also then on top of it pay whatever their little suburban city taxes are. And then the third area group is the unincorporated area. And they pay the least amount of tax. They just pay the countywide tax. We call it now metro tax. And they get the least amount of services. And I'll give you an example. I remember my dad, may rest in peace, was was on the city council of our 4-block city. I never understood why, and I asked him one day why there was a 4-block city. And he said that they had come together because they were tired of having garbage pickup every day. If you lived in the unincorporated area, every house had to make their deal with a garbage hauler. So you could do yours with BMI, and they can pick up on Monday, and I can do mine on, I can do mine with waste management, they can pick up on Tuesday. Anyway, you get the point. By the end of the week, you had a garbage truck on your street every day. So my dad said, number one, we got garbage one sweep. Number two, we got street lights covered through our taxes. And number three, he said, under the tax code, your local taxes are deductible. And I said, pretty smart, Dad. Yep, pretty smart. Now, there were a lot of cities that created themselves to avoid the expansion of diversity that was coming their way from the old city of Louisville. I'm not going to say that that didn't occur in the 60s, 70s. But that's the way it breaks down. And so our pitch, as an example, we went into an unincorporated area that had garbage pickup every day, and we offered to use the new metro government as the contractor if they would all agree which hauler they wanted. So they'd only have garbage pickup on one day. The metro council person from that area thought that's a great idea. What we found is everybody liked their hauler. Nobody wanted to switch. So you know, where we can help, we help, and where we can't, we leave it alone. But we have 3 different groups of taxpayers in our city, getting 3 different groups. And you can imagine how confusing that was, because once consolidation occurred, I started getting go to town hall meetings out in the suburbs, and they say, hey, you know, we merged, and you guys in the old city get free garbage, and we're still paying a hauling fee. And I'd have to go back through the process and say, if you guys want to pay the extra taxes, we'll be more than happy to pick up your garbage. Oh, no, we don't want to do that. Well, okay. Next question.
Was there any change in the structure of the school systems before you went into this, or as a result of doing this?
Well, the good news in Louisville was that we were required in the 70s, 74, by federal order to bus students across city, county. We had a city school system and a county school system when I was in school. And the city school system went under and consolidated with the county school system. And that was the time when the suit was filed for the existing new system was violating was creating separate but equal, and they really weren't equal, but they were separate. And so busing was put into effect in the 70s through a great deal of consternation, as you can imagine, with lots of folks in certain areas of our community. But having said that, we have a school system now of about 110,000 students. Middle-class kids are still a part of the system. The vice chair of humanities kids are in the public school system. The president of the Albrand kids are in the public school system, both of which can afford to go to a private school. So we have been able to hold the middle class in our schools. And so the answer to your question is, consolidation of the school system occurred before busing, so it was never an issue since we had a county-wide school system in our community.
Jerry, how did you get...
That's a real hurdle, depending on your schools.
Jerry, did you have any issues with the state legislature and the state senators? Was it hard to bring them in?
No, as I said, we brought them in from the get-go. We wanted them stakeholders in the ultimate plan. And it was like herding cats, but the county executive and I ran the meetings. And, state senators, state reps sometimes think they're far more important than anybody that they represent. They represent clue who they are. But so you listen to them and you have input with them, but you had to, for example, the leader of the House in Kentucky, I was a strong proponent of having no political party alignment for the elections for Metro Council and for mayor. I just didn't see any reason why they had to be partisan. Most art in most city of Louisville, the old county of Jefferson, ran as Democrats and Republicans. So the speaker pulled me aside. He said, Mayor, I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm not voting for this thing unless it's partisan. Well, end of argument. So, you know, you had to listen to the Sons of Guns and do what you got to do. You don't let, what is the old, you know, don't let the perfect get in the way of the good or something.
Right.
Thank you.
You know, I thought, for example, the chief executive should have a law department, which is what the old city had. I had a law department, and there was a state senator who was a big muckety-muck, and he was a buddy of the county attorneys, which is an elected position in the county. And he wanted the county attorney to be, by virtue of his office, attorney for the metro system. And we argued, and he said, I'm not voting for it if you have your own law director and the county attorney isn't a major player in the new government. And so the county attorney is the player in the government.
Jerry, during the political process and the referendum process, were there any issues between the city and the county and tension about redistribution of expenses? Was there one entity or the other that had very, very heavy expenses that politically people in the other part of the jurisdiction were pushing back and saying, I don't want their expenses to spill over onto me?
No, you know, there really wasn't anything that was like that. Having said that, you know, there was, the antis would go out to the county, and they would say, you know, you have county police today, but you know the crime is really in the city. And so if you vote for this merger, you're going to lose your police because they're going to have to put them where the crime is. And then they go into the city and say, you know, there's more people outside the city than in the county than there are in the city. And therefore, since there's more people out in the suburbs than in the city, you're going to lose your police out to the county because that's where the people are and that's where they're going to want to be protected. They use those kinds of arguments, depending on where they were. But, you know, I mean, the city was, the reality was all the tall buildings downtown were full, and they were full with high-wage employees, and they were generating some pretty good revenue in terms of occupation tax. The growth was in the industrial parks out in the county, and ultimately, you know, if you could consolidate the two, you'd be in pretty good financial shape. And that's the way we pitched it.
Any other questions?
Yeah, if you had to do all over again, is there anything that you would do up front that differently now with looking back over 12 years?
Yeah, you know, like I said, I would have a law director. I think it never happened, but with a separately elected official who's your lawyer, you know, I might as mayor want to build a basketball arena, which we did in KFC upstairs, and float bonds. And he could very well have stood up and said, that's the stupidest idea in the world. I'm not doing the legal work for those bonds, and by the way, I'm going to run against the mayor. That never happened, but it could. I still think you need a law director who, when you say as mayor, I want to do this, they say, I'll figure out a way to do it, rather than you can't, or, you know, et cetera. And the other one was the bipartisan issue. I just think it's silly to have a Democratic caucus in the city council and a Republican caucus. Taxpayers are paying for a Democratic press person in the Metro Council and a Republican press person in the Metro Council. I was much more hopeful that there would be caucuses in the council around issues like drainage or parks or bike lanes or something of that nature. And what happened was the Democrats had the majority and have had the majority on the Metro Council throughout the entire its existence. And McConnell, at the time when he was minority leader up here in D.C., you know, told his Republican buddies stick together and stop anything much like doing here with the president. And so that sort of that dictated a Democratic counterbalance to a Republican caucus in the Metro Council, and I think, in my judgment, that it should have been nonpartisan. And as I told the group before, depending on how you believe the chief executive, should exist, or the structure. The larger the council, the stronger the mayor. Richie Daley explained that to me one time. He got 51 aldermen in Chicago, and they had this screwed up structure where he has to go and run the council meeting, which I had no idea at the time. And so we tried. Once he told me that, it was obvious to me we needed to have as many council members as possible. Because the fewer that you have all these princes and princesses. As compared, if you have 10, 8 council people, each one's a prince. I was dealing with the supervisors of LA County yesterday. They were here, 4 of the 5 were. I mean, they are the kings. Each one of them has $2.5 million as a slush fund to spend in their districts. Each one has a helicopter assigned to their office. I mean, each one's a little king.
Can't drive down the
I was
road.
told that if you believe in a strong CEO, you guys got to make that decision. Then you try to make that council as big as possible. They become as ineffective as possible. That was very good. That's just being honest with you.
Okay. Well, Jerry, again, we thank you immensely.
I wish you guys well.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
very much.
Very much.
Have a
Hey,
great day.
have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, Bill, back up here.
Okay.
Sewers.
Jerry,
But I think you all agree, he does have a way of being pretty honest about how he felt and how it went. This sort of gives you a little hope that there is ways that we can get around different things and if we come up with great things.
Great guy.
Yeah.
Okay, where were we? Sure. We just talked about the additional work that we have to do, which I believe we meet the timetable. Okay, I don't think it's massive. Actually, a couple of the issues, for example, broadband, really is not a direct property tax issue. And we really do need to coordinate a recommendation with the economic development people here with the committee. And I'm hearing a lot of crazy stuff about broadband. What free Wi-Fi across the city? I don't know where to put broadband in terms of what some other people have said that probably know a heck of a lot more about it than I do. That's for sure. But one of the interesting things I think in our work is that we've come across a lot of data points and kind of like factoids or anecdotal information that I think it's very powerful on its own, but it's hard to kind of put it into context, and I think that's one of the things that we have to do. I was glad to hear about the options and tentative recommendations report that will maybe give us a chance to do that. And let me just give you a few examples. The public works cost, the highway street maintenance, varies by a factor on a per square mile basis. Varies by a factor of 10 within the county. We have a sanitary district that covers 19 homes. We have 17 public works service providers that are responsible for 25 miles or less of roads. And on the other hand, we have a town that potentially faces $30 million in capital requirements for phosphorus removal. I don't know how to get all that stuff right exactly where it needs to be, and it goes on and on and on, believe me. And so I think that in terms of how we present it, I think we have some work. But there is a very compelling case for action, and of course the most difficult question is how we create a pathway to accomplish our recommendations. I'd like to thank all the members of the Infrastructure Committee, all of you, especially Neil and Catherine have been fabulous working with us and been to all of our meetings and been very helpful. And to CGR and Joe and some of the ideas that Joe brought in to our committee. So that's about it. I was going to say one example, I think, where we've done some tentative recommendations, and, but if you look at the situation, we probably could flesh out a lot more. And I'm not sure if we should really do that or not. One of the things that I think we miss is how much money we're spending on these issues. For example, Public Works and Sewer, those two combined, $290 million in cost per year. Way higher than almost any other function of government. And the visibility, as Jerry was talking about, is, you know, the signs on his cop cars. You can't see the sewers. You just don't see it. The visibility isn't there. Just the awareness is not there. And yet, you know, believe me, as after 42 years in the dairy industry, you know how important the sewers are. Okay, it's one of the interesting things as we did our work was working with Tom Rhodes, where Tom Rhodes and the wastewater, you know, functions of the county really are answerable very directly to DEC and EPA. So we have those two major outside, at the state and federal level, you know, handing down mandate after mandate after mandate in the last 20 years in terms of how we do things and what we need to do, and offer and very well done. And you need to be at the same level in terms of expertise and capacity to be able to deal with that. And I think that's one of the things that Tom expressed very well to us. For example, he said that we're not structured to meet the EPA's key effectiveness attributes. You know, EPA's done a lot of high-level work in terms of what they expect. And these are issues like quality, sustainability, operational optimization, and resiliency of the system, those kind of issues, you know. So, and I think that we probably could flesh out our recommendations, tentative recommendations, significantly, especially in that area, I think. So, and Neil's been very, very helpful. And, so anyway, that's about where we are. We think that we can finish up by the end of October. We probably are going to have another meeting. And I think we need to just sort out, like, I don't know exactly what to say about mass transit. You know, again, it's not a component of property taxes directly, and maybe, again, I think we need to coordinate with, I think it's maybe more of an economic development issue than it is just an infrastructure issue. So that's, and like in broadband and in mass transit, I think are two areas where we really need to coordinate with other communities. So that's about it. Any questions or comments?
We're just debating down here which town it is that has the phosphorus.
Marcellus.
You're all wrong.
You were all wrong?
I thought one of our strong suits in this area in general was our cost of sewer and water from an economic business standpoint. Am I wrong?
No, you're right.
My brother lives in Boston, and I can't believe what he pays in sewer and water charge. It's like $1,000 a quarter.
We're at about $2, maybe right around $2, maybe 1,000 gallons. And for example, San Diego is $8, and they're moving up toward $12 1,000 gallons. So our cost of water, because of the foresight in the 60s of going to Lake Ontario and the city's opportunity with the Skinny Atlas Lake, which is a very high quality source, very, very little treatment required, really has the cost of water down. Frankly, that is a very, very strong economic development asset that we haven't exploited.
Well, and I think we need the other point of it, though, is, for example, the $30 million here. The pipelines to Lake Ontario are reaching the end of their useful life. You know, we have, what are we going to do about that? And obviously, we've all heard about the problems with the water supply in the city. So at the time that, even though specifically on water and wastewater, our costs have been low, we faced very significant challenges in terms of capacity as a county basis, and again, all of our government entities, of dealing with those particular issues and making sure that they don't get in the way of economic development.
I think it's too broad.
I think that's, I think that, maybe the way we've expressed it is something that really needs to be in our report also.
Well, I think a lot of people have the average citizen has a concept with water that the water problems is a city problem because of the pipes, they've seen holes of water pouring out of it. But I don't think a lot of them realize that what you just said is that we're getting near the life of that pipeline all the way to Ontario. And there is room, they had foresight in the beginning to have enough land, we can put a second pipe in, but can you imagine what the cost today is to put that second pipe in? And that is where all the county people get the water. But see, it's a little, it's what you see is your reality instead of what you don't see.
Right.
Or not told about too. So, just something like a water with a city-county mindset, it's, we're all of this in it together, and over the next 10 years, we'll be in it together, trying to figure out what to do in the county.
The other, and I could be wrong on this one, but I would liken it to, I use the example of, if there's too many small structures that have responsibility for a smaller piece of the pie, so I'll liken it to a school. So if a school gets a $1,000 allotment for their annual budget, and which is not, but let's take it at that, but the computer costs $1,200, they can never buy the computer.
Right.
I mean, no matter what they do, they can't buy the computer. So what ends up happening with all these small structures is that if replacing being proactive to replace the pipelines creates this amount of money, but we only have this amount in this particular part of the system for which we oversee, we never get to that. So it just continues to decay or erode, or we just do without it. And that's something. The economies of scale come into big time play here with regard to what gets done proactively in order to keep systems operating cost effectively. If you never really plan for that, you never get to it, and it ultimately costs even more to operate.
Right, and what we've done is we've split up our tax base.
Right.
That's what we've done.
Right.
And to be honest with you, look, I've been around this town a long time, and I had no idea. Now here I am on the commission. I just had no concept of the significance of splitting up our tax base and how the problems that's created. And I think that's one of, with respect to public engagement, I think that there's a lot of potential there in terms of really educating people with respect to how the split up of our tax base. What is the range? What was it, $12 million to $27 billion? And how splitting up that tax base is really hurting us.
And to me, that's an important piece of how we weave that in, and Joe, to educating people, because if they only know that every year they put so much money into their community pot, and they believe that has always sustained them to have this community, whatever part of the community they may live in, they think that that's working. They don't realize that by other strategies, they have lower costs, but greater capacity to increase some of the things that need to be done. And that's educating in the sense that of not trying to place blame. If you never get that $1,200 as the little school that wants to buy the computer, you can't blame anybody, they just never got it. They could never get there, they were too small.
They don't know what they don't know.
Exactly, yeah, and that's...
Well, and I think the infrastructure is one of the big ones that people they don't see, they don't realize coming down the pike is, I think the people in Marcellus are starting to realize that they got a problem. But, a lot of, we just don't realize. City realize their problem because you keep driving around different streets to get away around the water, bubbling up, so.
There is one
Have you ever
piece,
seen our phosphorus plant? It is? Okay.
I don't think it applies necessarily to broadband per se, although possibly some of this Smart Bond Act money might play into some of that. But there is, I believe, a statewide initiative on the emergency communication systems being developed so that small entities don't all have to engage in that. Who retired out of the Manlius Police Department?
Bill Bliley.
Bill Bliley. And I believe that he's heading up that particular, and it's supposed to be statewide, that particular initiative. That's, I think, comes out of a 9/11 study. for the states, because at 9/11, we apparently couldn't talk to each other from
Right.
one place to
Right,
another.
that's the NIM, the National
Yeah.
Incident
Right,
Minutes.
yeah. Okay, a
See,
meeting,
I have one quick question. Bill or Darlene, in your discussions, was there any thought to making a recommendation or suggesting that public-private partnerships be looked at for things like water, sewage, corrections, broadband, those sorts of things?
You first, Bill.
I would say that there really weren't, Jim. I think we were focused on the costs and the relation to property tax costs. There's really better than that. I think just in terms of trying to take advantage of the economies of scale within, like, for example, I certainly would not be in favor of that with respect to either water or sewer, you know. Now, maybe there's some when you really think about it, there's all kinds of services that the county is subcontracting out anyway. So in a sense, there really are a lot of public-private partnerships in place, especially, you know, in a lot of different functions. But I think it's certainly something we probably should take a little better look at that, you know, in terms of potential. And with interest rates so low, Jim, people can borrow money real cheap. So.
In public safety, Jim, we did not talk about that for police or fire or corrections. We did, however, talk about it for EMS, and in fact, there is private sector EMS ambulance service.
okay. Our next one is the municipal operations, which is normally a meeting audit, but she is down in High Point, North Carolina, being inducted into the Furniture Hall of Fame as we speak. So Joe's going to take over. Give us a little update.
I'll be able to fill any of the shoes, but I'll try. That's true too. I wasn't at the last Municipal Operations Committee, but Lori provided some great notes. But I asked Dan, Lori, anybody else that was at that committee meeting, to the extent that there are other issues that you want to add to my comments here, feel free to. The committee focused primarily on clarifying the options, the rationale, the tentative recommendations that we as a group talked about that were presented at the last commission meeting. I just want to highlight a couple of these in particular. One, on the issue of tax assessment, you'll remember that one of the tentative recommendations we already have in place. I think we're at 3 coordinated assessment programs within the county. So the committee had looked at opportunities to leverage economies of scale by either expanding existing caps or looking for similarly sized and density neighboring communities to enter into new caps, new coordinated assessment programs. Well, long story short, there has historically been a state aid incentive attached to coordinated assessment programs, but there was some question as to whether that aid program is still in place. So we're in the process of trying to verify that with the State Office of Real Property Services. 2 of the other items that were loose ends the last time the committee met, first of all, social services and health. There was some discussion of that, and Ann was going to provide, I think you already have this, Ann was going to provide some thoughts around a draft recommendation for, right now we have this unique as far as other states and counties in the country go, this cost share between the state level and the county level. So some thoughts around building a recommendation that gets at that structural challenge that we have here in New York State that certainly burdens the counties, and also some recommendations around human service programs, the delivery, the administration of human service programs in the county. And then the other loose end from the last meeting was libraries, and we now have some tentative recommendations that I believe the committee reviewed that were supplied by Susan Mitchell around opportunities for use of statewide library cards, reducing or waiving fines for younger library patrons in particular. And this is one that we had actually alluded to at the last committee meeting, but that we're still doing some work around, and that involves pursuing opportunities for broader regional purchasing and material sharing, especially including the higher education institutions in the region. And I would add to that, I don't know that this was raised at the committee meeting, but I would add to that exploring the feasibility of better integrating the library system with BOCES libraries in the community. We have kind of these parallel frameworks here. It's not unique to Onondaga County. We've seen this at CGR, we've seen this across the state, and we've actually worked with some counties to evaluate the possibility of improving efficiencies and lowering some costs through better integration sharing among those various systems. So anyway, those are the loose ends on social services, health, and libraries. And again, I'd invite anybody else from the committee or who's at those meetings to add on to those points if anything they think is relevant.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Amini. Very nice. Timeline. We're moving right along. The one thing that's missing in this timeline, if you look about it, because if you're going, this is just tentative, we're trying to figure out how to maybe try to make this timeline, but we really need your input on it. What is really missing in this timeline is between the October-November drafting of options and preliminary recommendations and November 15th release the draft report, we have to meet and make those recommendations. So right now we're working very hard to get some dates because that is the big meeting when we have to decide what the recommendations are going to be on it. So in this timeline, Murph will be getting back to you shortly. We're trying to coordinate a lot, and it might require more than one meeting too. We really don't know because, you know, when the rubber hits the road, we'll need a lot of discussion on it. But go ahead, Joe, and
Mark, you're going to speak to the timeline?
oh, okay.
I'll speak to the timeline, sure. This is the timeline that Joe and I and the rest of the staff believe that we can meet. As you know, I would point out that we had initially thought that we could complete our final report by the end of December. And I think if somebody felt strongly, we probably could attempt to complete our final report, but it wouldn't have the public engagement timeframe piece that we believe we want to have, most importantly. And secondly, as we heard today, we still have committees who are wrapping up loose ends and et cetera. So the push to do it by the end of the year just didn't seem worth what we would be giving up on the public engagement side and the committee work side. This is the timeline that we think we can meet. We are working really hard on tying up the loose ends of committee work so that the options and preliminary recommendations can be presented to you in one report for review, maybe the first week in November, and consideration for presentation to the public. I would remind everybody that our commitment is that this is, for lack of a better word, a discussion document, right? These aren't final recommendations. These aren't the only recommendations. There may be other ideas out there that people have or thoughts or whatever that we have just not thought we missed. So this is the rollout of a living, working, breathing document that needs a lot of feedback and people tearing it apart and making sure we didn't skip something really obvious.
Said it was going to have a draft watermark on every page. Every page.
It's going to have a lot of warnings. So, but in our own conversations, you know, when you use the word recommendations, it sounds like our report. This is it. This isn't it. You know, this is the beginning of our recommendation phase, I would remind everybody. So I sent this last night or yesterday afternoon. If anybody has any thoughts on the timeline, change, etc., feel free. We can talk about it now. Otherwise, this is what we're going to shoot for, which puts some pressure on November.
When might you bring this to the mayors and supervisors, sir?
Yeah, I think
they're electeds as well.
Right.
Jerry said it in his comments. All the electeds are on board. It's not even in your schedule here, and
Well, that's part of.
we're pretty, not to say not everybody in this room is busy, but I mean, some of them are in elections right now, some of them are in, and if we don't have buy-in from the elected officials and we don't have time, I don't think you can sit there and say we're gonna give them 2 weeks. It's not gonna work. You know, we gotta give some time and some, I mean, these people are the ones that are gonna push this forward. These are the ones that are gonna have to to
Okay.
buy in and be part of this process. Recommendations, draft, whatever word you want to use.
Yep.
But I think you got to give that some time, and they may have some ideas. They may have something you
Well,
might,
the
you know.
people, and that's what's so important about the elected officials. These are people who live these issues every single
Right.
day, and that's why it's really crucial.
Right.
I thought we were trying to schedule something like, our meeting isn't in there, and their meeting isn't there, but I think that they need to be on board.
Yeah.
I thought it needs to be before our release.
But I would put it in your timeline as,
Yeah.
be as transparent as possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, so they know, and everybody knows that the elected officials and the people that they put their
Put a
trust
big-
in
put a big
are
date.
going to have a
Yeah.
chance to review this.
There
And then it puts them on, also it says, hey guys,
This is it.
here's your time frame. We
Yeah.
gave you as much notice as we could, you know about it, and Mark and I and Pat, and whoever else is elected, we'll get it out to our membership and let them know.
We can't underestimate the anxiety and fear that might be prevalent with some folks. And if we give them notice and follow up after that, then, you know, that will alleviate some of the anxiety and fear factor.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, right now, I mean, if you think of every chief head for a village or a town, we know that we aren't really recommending too many things of that, but they don't.
Exactly.
I mean, except
Exactly.
the two of you that are sitting at the table. I mean, you know.
The other part of it
they're-
though, when they do know that part, they can also then endorse the
Help.
fact that something else that they could support has to happen
Right.
if they're going to also benefit in the long run from
Correct.
some type of a metropolitan perspective versus all separate
Individual.
entities that exist with no interdependence
Correct.
concept.
Correct. And one of the things that Jerry didn't mention, that he mentioned the first time around, when he said he had those 80 cities or something in their county, is they eventually, a lot of them, and I forgot to ask it because I was going to ask them because I thought it was important, eventually a lot of them turned over a lot of the substantive kinds of things, but they just did it when they realized they didn't want to be running the water system anymore, or they'd be responsible for their sewers, you know, that kind of stuff. So, but it happened by attrition, it happened by officers coming in and saying,
Was
when
more
are we doing
organic.
this?
Right.
But, yeah, but it wasn't,
It was
just
voluntary.
happened. It was voluntary. It was when they realized they
couldn't live with it.
couldn't live with
Yeah.
in our state, can't live with a tax cap anymore. I mean, because it's people you're mostly paying for in towns and villages, and if that's gonna be constantly going up and that your tax cap is there, I mean, so there's gonna be some reality on it. But I think that's a really good idea about putting, because I think we should put our big meeting in here before it gets published, the meeting with all the officers, invite everybody, get them on their calendars now so that they know they have that date and opportunity to hear it on that. I did skip, oh, excuse me.
I just want to, I
Yeah.
never heard Jerry before, so that was my first time. But, you know, he made a couple of really good points that I don't want us to lose sight of in our report, that are really critical to our community. One is, this isn't about saving taxes, this is about economic development. And we forget that ourselves when we're talking about why we're doing this. And so I want to say, can we just make sure that as we write in this report, that keeps being the top flashpoint. And the other is, who's taking over in our community, right? Is it the county taking over the city, or is the city taking over the county? It all depends on where you live and where you sit. But we have to dance the dance with that sense of who's taking over who, and what do we say that diminishes that, right? What do we say that takes the air out of that thought? Okay. Very important.
And if you look at the timeline too, one of the things that bothers me a little bit, it says, you know, we're going to public feedback from November through mid-January. Well, you know, there are holidays in there.
Oh, a
There's-
month worth.
And ignoring if we've gotten past elections, okay, but now we're in a time frame that we're really talking almost like January, you know, and so this is gonna be, I'll be pleasantly surprised if we can do that, but I am one that I'm not gonna vote to keep going and running on the tight time schedule if we can't meet that. This is too important, too many people are being, hanging their hats on that we're successful, so, on that. But, we have our whole agenda is everybody, Melanie Littlejohn had a death in her family, she's on her way down south right now this morning. So why don't you just give us a little bit on that?
So I will talk very
I'm
quickly.
gonna have to jump off, I'm sorry.
Okay.
But, just 2 seconds on that public officials meeting, I think the advice you guys, we all got was really good, really important, it's really critical. We have to think about that meeting, and also, as they did in Louisville, they invited the state legislators too.
Yep.
And I don't know whether we need to make the ground ready. I know the senators are there, the assembly members, I don't know for sure. I suspect somebody does, but we need to get them ready for that meeting too, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jim.
That makes sense.
Thanks, Jim.
That might have to happen.
Okay.
Thank you.
That might have to happen at the chair's level, I think. I really do. I mean,
Well,
I'm not getting anywhere with Senator DeFrancisco or Senator Sturpey. I mean, they have pressures well beyond the village mayor or a town supervisor. I think that the chairs and the report to them.
We sort of have kept some of them, but we need to, I think, broaden it. We've kept some of them abreast of where we've been going, just to keep them informed where we were, but it's big generality, so we're got to get down to the nitty gritty a little bit at some point in time with them.
I just don't want it to fall apart at that level.
Right.
I can see some of the businesses.
Yeah, they were gonna do something.
And people on this
Well.
commission get it.
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
We'll work on revising this, Joe and I, and get it back out in the next few days. I would just want to remind everybody, I totally agree, obviously, that the town supervisor, every elected that we can touch base with prior to a public rollout will be critical. But more critical is every commission member has to see it and be comfortable prior to any elected official seeing it and being comfortable. So there's that two-step process that we will have to combine into a tight 1 or 2 week look for turnaround time. Public engagement has met several times. I'll just quickly go through. We have a new PowerPoint that we've been testing out. We had one presentation in September that Kevin did to the Mackenzie Hughes Law Firm fall staff outing, so to speak. And I did one last night or the night before in Tip Hill with Chad Ryan at the Tipperary Hill Association. And Kevin and I did one last week at the GE Retirees, annual monthly GE Retirees Luncheon. So that's 3 hits on our new PowerPoint, which is about what we need, we find, to get totally comfortable in terms of what works, what slides you don't need to focus on, blah, 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 et cetera.
You didn't have any fire engines, I think.
No fire engines, right. So the PowerPoint is working. It obviously will be revised as we move into rolling out the options and recommendations phase. We have another presentation with Neil and Kevin next week. I would remind everybody that we do have the new PowerPoint. If there's any group, any organization, any place that you would like us or like us to call or have them call us, we're open for business and would love to get
Yeah,
out.
that's what I'm really saying. I'm going to be with Murph at 2020, Syracuse 2020 on Monday, and one of the things we're talking to the employers is we really need to get out to the vehicles. So whether it's your employees, whether it happens to be if they have a monthly, whatever it is, we'll write script for it. I mean, we'll give you an article to put in your thing. We'll be glad to take a 10 or 15 minutes with your employees, but the commission needs to start too in getting this out there. Right? We're going to ask the employers to do that on Monday morning, but we need you too to be thinking of where can we get somebody out and stuff, because it still scares me that people I know all over the city have never heard the word consensus, never have heard modernization. I mean, and these are educated people, and I know they're people who vote. So it's really annoying to me that. Do we have a Twitter feed?
We do have a Twitter feed, yes. So that brings me, I'll go very quickly on Mel's report. We're currently putting together the full strategy, which about probably 70% of it is going to be digital based, Twitter, social media, Facebook, etc. We're currently talking about a new interactive landing page through the web where people could actually maybe vote on options and recommendations of particular things. We have to sort of dig through that a little bit more. It requires a fairly large server, et cetera, for people's responses. But we're in the middle of putting together all those little parts. I think the most important thing that Mel would want you guys to know is that the initial rollout of the options and recommendations report, she envisions the first, as we did with the baseline, a large editorial board meeting with that report. And she would like the 3 co-chairs, if possible, as well as each committee chair to be present, because she believes they are as expert as anybody and can speak to the areas much more fluently than the co-chairs, because they have such a deep knowledge of the business sector. Obviously, as Kevin has said from the very beginning, and now we are committed. We hope that Syracuse Media and Syracuse.com is a strong partner in disseminating the information as we move through November, December, January, so that more and more people, at
Well,
least.
you heard Jerry, he said it was
aware.
the newspapers were 100% behind
Right.
it, and on top of it, it was the business community that pushed.
Right.
They were the catalysts, they were the ones
Right.
that, so that's what
We did, in late August, put together a little survey following up on the Onondaga Citizens League survey that was done 10 years ago, right, Larry? I think it was 10 years. In an attempt to try to sort of test some of those questions again, same theme, same questions, what would be the response? So we did Lori was the staff, it was great at all of this. We designed the survey, we put together random samples out of all registered voters in the county of Onondaga, and we had 2 of our capstone Maxwell students who were around in August and said they would love to work on it. And it confirmed what most of us would probably suspect. There are very few home phone numbers that work, very few home phone numbers that get answered. And so it
because they
is,
see it on their screen.
it's most likely not our most, not be our most successful way of engaging people in this day and age. They made about 200 calls and got 12 respondents to 200 calls. So it was time consuming, to say the least, for not as much interaction as we would like. Very few, the comments were no surprises.
And I think what we'll do, is I really want to keep moving, we're past 9 o'clock.
Yep.
All right, we'll do a little summary, and so that just so that you know what we're doing. But I want Neil to spend just a little time explaining to me how the URI went in at 25 million instead of 50 million I thought we were going to get.
But we're very grateful.
I'm grateful, but.
This is just 2 minutes. In case you haven't seen the URI report, this is a copy of it, Central New York Rising from the ground up. It was submitted, I think it went in the evening of October 5th.
Yes.
And my understanding is it has been very well received. One of the 6 signature investments and strategies in this report specifically is called Investing for Success. And it is the consensus work-to-date summary that was reviewed with pretty much all the principal electeds in Onondaga County. So they wrote off basically on the language that would go into this report. Significant, I think, in that is the following quote: over 5 years, the Central New York Regional Economic Development Council expects to invest an estimated $25 million to ensure the success of Consensus, the Commission on Government Modernization. And it's covered basically over 2 pages, pages 73 to 75. And another quote, and this is the last thing: Consensus has been a solution-oriented community engagement effort designed for action. Now, I think the feedback that Rob has had from the governor's office is that this is going to be very important. The consensus piece is one of those 6 signature initiatives, and potentially an award to Central New York. And that's why it's highlighted in the document. The theme is, this is Central New York taking care of business. As you know, the governor holds that in a very high regard in terms of his ownership. So,
Okay, now you have an appearance though down in Albany, right?
yeah, That's coming up
October 21st,
21st.
which each region has been asked to present to the state board, who will, the judges essentially, of the competition, and they're given a allotted period of time to make a presentation based on their submission, and then answer questions. Rob and the Chancellor, as the co-chairs of the Red Sea here, will be the lead presenters, but he did ask Sharon Owens to represent the consensus initiative at that presentation, which we again feel is really great, because not only will Sharon do a great job, but it will continue to keep in the forefront the consensus work and the consensus goals as part of URI. I don't think that we can, just to take 2 seconds, diminish the impact and import of consensus being included in the URI. We're kind of, I am kind of stuck in the weeds doing the work, you know, the blah, 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 what about this, what about that? But it is a major step in partnership and push and validation to the work, to the goal, to the idea, to the concept that it is in the URI, that it was considered to be a major initiative for our region, and that it will have the impact on us both economically and, you know, all of our own structure stuff that we know about. So I continue to be grateful to the Red Sea and Rob and the Chancellor, obviously, for their support, and Neil, everybody down there. But it has been it's a tremendous boost to our effort. It will add substantially to our ability to message this and to be a part of the conversation.
Perfect. There's 2 quick things that I can add along those lines. You know, it is an incredible testament, frankly, to the work that this group has been doing. We know what importance the governor is placing on this type of an initiative, the fact that we're the only county in the state that is doing this at this point, that is, we are out in front. It was seen as an incredible differentiator, frankly, for our submission versus every other region, and knowing the importance that the governor places on that is one of the reasons that this was absolutely seen as an important piece, as one of the 6 signature investments. But the other thing that I can tell you we are incredibly proud about in this URI submission is how all of the 6 signature investments tie together. And there are issues that have been talked about at this table this morning, and they are tightly interwoven, and this is every bit as important as the other 5 signature investments to making this region economically successful going forward and really pulling us together, frankly, as one community.
Thanks. All right, just as a reminder, within this next week, you're going to hear from Murph. I'm going to suggest we put 2 meetings in to try to schedule it, so to get in your calendars on it. We'll put in the meeting, we'll try to schedule that, the meeting with all the elected officials. It will come after our meeting where we make decisions. We'll put one in as the first meeting, but we'll have one in your schedule now, is in case we have to go to a second meeting for discussion purposes on that. And we'll put the officials meeting in, we'll get this timeline back out to you next week, all right, after we have consensus on enough dates so we can get the majority of the committee here, because we're right down to the crunch. I really thank you for extending that meeting today, and I'm excited.
So-
We're moving. Thanks for everybody.
Everything else.